At a certain point, it no longer feels accurate to blame circumstances or timing for where you are. A deeper realization begins to emerge, one that is far more difficult to confront. You start recognizing a pattern that has repeated itself too many times to dismiss. The hesitation, the delays, the unfinished beginnings, they were never random events. They were choices made quietly, repeatedly, almost unnoticed. You have likely said the words countless times before, perhaps even recently. I'll start tomorrow. And in the moment, the thought appears reasonable. It feels responsible, calculated, even wise. Yet somewhere within you, another voice recognizes the truth. Tomorrow has slowly become the place where intentions disappear. This process rarely happens suddenly. It unfolds gradually. One delay becomes another. One excuse follows the next, and each time the mind wraps the delay in logic. It offers explanations that sound convincing. It frames postponement as necessity. Until eventually, what once seemed temporary reveals itself as a pattern that has kept you unmoving for far too long. What makes this dangerous is not its intensity, but its comfort. You are not failing in dramatic ways. You are not collapsing under visible pressure. You are simply remaining unchanged. And because there is no immediate disaster, it becomes easy to ignore, easy to believe that change will eventually happen on its own. But change never arrives by accident. It is created through decisions that often feel uncomfortable in the moment they are made. If you are honest with yourself, you can already feel the distance between what you claim to want and what your actions have actually produced. There is likely a quiet voice within you that has grown increasingly difficult to silence. Not emotional, not chaotic, simply clear. It reminds you of what you promised yourself you would do. It points toward the areas where you continue to hold back. It reveals the places where hesitation has replaced movement. And that voice persists because the issue has never truly been a lack of knowledge. You already know what must be done. You possess the ability. The true struggle exists in the distance between understanding and execution. That is where excuses quietly survive. Over time, you have learned how to protect them. You describe them as preparation. You call them patience. You convince yourself that you are waiting for the right moment. But beneath all of these explanations lies something much simpler. You have repeatedly chosen immediate comfort over necessary progress. And the longer this continues, the heavier it becomes. Not because the work itself is unbearable, but because carrying the awareness of inaction creates its own burden. That burden eventually transforms into frustration. Not frustration directed at the world, but frustration directed inward. Then comes a moment when that frustration changes form. It no longer feels temporary. It becomes decisive. You grow tired, not only of the situation itself, but of repeating the same cycle. You grow tired, not only of the situation itself, but of repeating the same cycle again and again. Tired of negotiating with yourself, tired of watching time move while your life remains unchanged. This moment is different. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is precise. It cuts through every excuse you have been using to protect yourself. And for the first time, you begin to see your reality clearly, without distortion, without softened explanations. You realize that no one is coming to force you forward. No perfect opportunity will suddenly erase resistance. No burst of motivation will permanently carry you into action. If change occurs, it will happen because you chose to create it. Nothing else. That realization can feel heavy, but it is also freeing because it places responsibility back into your own hands. It removes the illusion that external forces are entirely responsible for your condition. It reveals that the true barrier between you and progress may simply be your next decision. Right now, you stand at a point where two paths exist. You can continue repeating the pattern, or you can interrupt it. Not through some dramatic transformation overnight, but through a small and immediate act. A decision to move even when you do not feel like moving. A decision to act before overthinking convinces you not to. Because this is where real change begins. Not in motivation, not in perfect emotional readiness, but in action taken despite uncertainty or discomfort. This is the part most people avoid. And it is also the dividing line between those who remain stagnant and those who evolve. You do not need to repair your entire life today. You do not need a flawless strategy. You do not need certainty. You need honesty. And then you need action. Even a single act can begin to break the cycle if you are willing to take it. Once that cycle begins to weaken, something within you changes. You start viewing yourself differently, not as someone who endlessly plans and delays, but as someone capable of execution. And that shift, though subtle, can alter everything that follows. So, if you are truly exhausted by your own excuses, not merely frustrated but genuinely finished with them, then this moment matters. Not tomorrow, not later. Then this moment matters. Not tomorrow, not later. Now, because the next decision you make will either strengthen the pattern you have lived inside or finally begin to destroy it. There comes a point in every individual's life when truth, once softened by endless explanation and hidden beneath layers of reasoning, stands directly before him. It does not arrive with noise or spectacle. It comes quietly, yet with a clarity impossible to ignore. In that moment, a man stops searching outside himself for the source of his condition and begins, perhaps for the first time, to examine himself honestly. He begins to recognize a pattern, not an isolated failure, not a temporary delay, but a repeated series of choices that have silently shaped his current reality. Plans left unfinished, actions postponed, intentions spoken with certainty but abandoned before execution. At first, this realization creates discomfort because it removes uncertainty as a shield. It dismantles the belief that circumstance alone determined his position. It reveals that many outcomes once blamed on misfortune were, in truth, reinforced through repeated decisions. This marks the beginning of honest awareness. Few men arrive at this point easily. Most move through life protected by explanations that reduce the discomfort of inaction. They tell themselves the timing was wrong, that more preparation was necessary, that circumstances were unfavorable. And though these explanations often appear reasonable, they serve one primary purpose. They protect the individual from confronting reality. That reality is simple. What is repeatedly delayed is often not delayed at all. It is avoided. Yet the mind resists this conclusion. It seeks comfort. It creates new explanations, new assurances, new reasons why action should wait. It promises that tomorrow will be better, that clarity will eventually arrive, that readiness is just ahead. And so the pattern continues quietly, reinforced through agreement with oneself. Each acceptance strengthens the habit. Each delay becomes easier. Each acceptance strengthens the habit. Each delay becomes easier. Each excuse becomes more believable. Over time, hesitation evolves into identity, and this condition rarely announces itself as failure. It disguises itself as patience, as careful thinking, as responsibility, as preparation. Yet, beneath every disguise remains the same truth. Action is absent. The danger of this state is not simply what it prevents, but how comfortable it feels. There is no immediate collapse, no dramatic consequence. Life continues. The individual still functions, and because nothing visibly breaks apart, the pattern survives. This is what gives it power. A man may spend years believing he is progressing because he is thinking, planning, considering, yet without execution, thought remains unrealized. Intention remains inactive. Eventually, however, the accumulation of abandoned intentions creates pressure. Not pressure from others, pressure from within. The awareness of what could have been done. The recognition of time passing without movement. This pressure emerges because every individual carries an internal standard, whether acknowledged consciously or not. And when actions consistently fall beneath that standard, tension forms. Explanations may soften that tension temporarily, but they cannot erase it. Eventually, the individual reaches a moment where avoidance can no longer hide truth. This is the moment of honest recognition. Not emotional, not chaotic. Clear, direct, unavoidable. The individual sees that he has participated in maintaining his own stagnation. That the distance between where he stands and where he wishes to be is not caused primarily by lack of knowledge or lack of capability, but by inconsistent action. Though difficult, this realization is powerful because it restores responsibility. As long as a man believes his condition is controlled entirely by external forces, he remains dependent upon those forces for change. He waits, he hopes, he reacts. But once he understands that his own decisions shaped his condition, he gains something far more valuable: authority. Authority over direction, authority over behavior, authority over what comes next. This realization creates another challenge. Because authority also demands responsibility. No longer can he place blame entirely upon time, circumstance, or other people. He must accept that his future will be shaped by his choices. This acceptance requires courage, because it removes every refuge. Yet within that removal exists possibility. The man who reaches this point stands at a threshold. Behind him exists the pattern he finally understands. Ahead of him exists the opportunity to change it. And that change does not require instant perfection. It does not demand complete transformation overnight. It requires one thing: a decision. Not a decision that exists only in thought, but one expressed through action. At this point, the individual must resist the temptation to return to explanation. He must not promise himself another tomorrow. He must not disappear into endless preparation, because he now understands where that path leads. Instead, he must act, no matter how small the action may appear, because action alone interrupts the pattern. Thought can identify it, emotion can react to it, but only action changes it. That first act carries importance beyond its size. Action changes it. That first act carries importance beyond its size. It marks a shift, a movement from delay toward execution, from intention toward reality. And through that shift, something begins changing internally. The individual no longer sees himself only as someone who plans. He begins seeing himself as someone who acts. This shift in identity is subtle yet profound, because identity is shaped not by intention but by repeated behavior. As awareness deepens, the individual realizes that the pattern which once controlled him was never permanent. It was sustained, and anything sustained through repetition can also be altered through repetition. This realization replaces hopelessness with possibility. Not distant possibility, immediate possibility, because change does not require perfect conditions. It requires a different decision, and that decision is always available. Thus, honest recognition becomes the foundation of transformation, not the end of struggle, but the beginning of direction. It marks the moment when a man stops moving unconsciously and begins acting with awareness. The moment when he stops negotiating endlessly with himself and begins leading himself instead. So let him remain in that clarity. Let him refuse to soften it with fresh excuses. Let him accept it fully, because within that truth exists power. And let him say with quiet certainty, I see my actions clearly, without excuse or distortion. I recognize the pattern I have maintained, and through this awareness, I choose to change it.